Okay. Webinar's live at 4 p.m. You can start.
Nice. Hi, good to see everybody coming into the room. Now, my clock says 3:55. I think we have 5 more minutes. Yeah, we can let people come in. So good to see people coming in. Keahi is there. So just making small talk. Keahi actually pointed me in the direction of this beautiful book cover. Keahi Lee. She said, please do a shout out for me. So here's your shout out, Keahi. Keahi bought this painting from Meala Bishop. It's called Kalopa'a o Waiahole. And it's about the people who are the hard taro of Waiahole. And Meala's painting is so amazing. And as soon as I saw it, that kind of gave me the idea for how I wanted to do the book. So mahalo palena ole to Keahili for buying this painting and sharing it with me. The actual original now is held by Kalama Niheu. She has the original. It's very cool. I see Julie and Chase, former students, and really nice to see everybody coming into the room. Oh, there's Kathy. Hi, Kathy. I know you guys cannot talk back to us, but I'm gonna just say hi when I see you guys coming in the room. Hey, Cindy. There's Cindy Franklin. Just gonna go back here and make sure that I Okay, it's 4 o'clock. So we have 23 people here. I guess I can just get started and then, people can join us as they come into the room. So, hi everyone, welcome to our panel. Just really happy to see all the participants in our little chat box. And my name's Candace Fujikane. I'm an English professor at the University of Hawaiʻi. And I'm really happy to be talking about my book today, Mapping Abundance for a Planetary Future, Kanaka Maoli and Critical Settler Cartographies in Hawaii. And it just came out in February. So just it's been a really great journey because I've met so many amazing aloha ʻāina, people who stand for the protection of lands and waters in Hawaii, but also stand for the vision of an independent Hawaii, a Hawaii where where Kanaka Maoli can make choices about the natural world and not be bound to choices made by others. Yeah. So uh, very, very fortunate to have today two people I regard as my greatest teachers. So in the acknowledgements, Hi'ile Cavello and Puni Jackson are listed as two of some of my best teachers who taught me so much about looking at the world in a more abundant way. So Puni Jackson is program director at Ho'oulu Āina, and she's a Native Hawaiian cultural practitioner. She's led endeavors in Hawaiian cultural and ʻāina-based educational programming for over 18 years. She has been instrumental in establishing Ho'oulu Āina as a healing refuge for the community and for Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners. So a lot of people have been to Ho'oulu Āina. It's a lot of extra credit at the University of Hawaii for people to go to Ho'oulu Āina and put in some time, to learn what it's like to grow that relationship with ʻāina. Yeah. And Hi'ile Cavello has been Paipai'ohe'ea's executive director since 2007 after having served as an educator, facilities manager, and kuho kuapa coordinator for the organization. Raised in Kahalu'u by her fishing family, she has been a student to the art and science of Lawai'a and Kaneohe Bay her entire life. And I love going on Facebook and seeing pictures of Hi'ile going catching he'e with her dad. It's just kind of, your pictures on Facebook are really amazing. So love being in contact with you guys on Facebook and on Instagram. So I'm just going to start out talking for a little bit about the book, and then, we can go into it however way you want to talk about things. I'm going to keep it kind of open and free flowing because these are like two super smart wahine, and I love them so much. So anything they say is like, they drop gems all the time, okay, when they're talking. So to talk a little bit about the book, I can tell you really in broad strokes that there are 2 chapters on Wai'anae, 2 chapters on Mauna Awakea, 1 chapter on Kalihi, and 1 chapter on the area from Waiahole, actually from He'ea all the way to Punalu'u. So those are the geographical areas that I look at. And, the beginning in the acknowledgements, I explained that I was talking story with Danny Bishop, who's a kalo farmer in Waiahole. And he was talking about how, we have so many victories, so many land struggles and water struggles and the victories, but we don't always connect them and see how these victories are connected. And so I thought, well, it would be really great to write a book where we look at those connected points of victory, where land struggles and the people have been successful in fighting off harmful development projects. But it would be also cool to see how restoration projects are connected to each other and build upon each other. And in the most beautiful metaphor, actually, Hi'ile talked about how when we're talking about, the relationships between restoration projects, she described how she was noticing this corridor of Haumea, all the yellow hau flowers that stretch up and over the mountain. So where I am, I'm speaking to you from He'eauli. The fish ponds at He'ea, the hau flowers grow all the way up to, there's Kako'oiwi, that restoration project. There's Papahana Kuaola, that restoration project. The hau travels up over the Ko'olau down to Ho'oulu Āina and all the way down to the Kia'io okay, now I'm like totally blanking out. Mokawea, the ke'ehio mokawea. Okay, so that yellow line of the how flowers travels, and that's how all of these restoration projects are connected to each other and they build upon each other. So, you know, in this time of climate change, a lot of people are really anxious and really overwhelmed, and sometimes it results in people being either paralyzed with fear or sticking their head in the sand and not wanting to talk about climate change. But what's striking to me is when you talk to people who actually work at restoration projects, they have this really cool kind of energy and optimism about the future. And why is that? Why is that? Where does that optimism come from? And it comes from viewing climate change as a chance to renew and strengthen relationships between Kanaka and the Akua, between the people. And Akua can be defined as elemental forms. So Pua Kanahele, Kumuhula Pua Kanahele defines Akua as the elemental forms or the natural processes or natural energies in the world. And so when you cultivate that relationship with the Akua, then you don't have to be afraid of the future because you learn to work with them. So I'm just gonna share screen really quickly, a video. It's like a PowerPoint image. I just wanna share this one image with you, which has some really important things that I want you to take away from this discussion. And so I have this great quote from Noelani Punivai, who is a Hawaiian Studies professor specializing in natural resources management. And she was talking about, she was teaching at the Pu'uhuluhulu University on Mauna Wakea. And this is what she said to us. She said, um, if you know your akua, if you are pili to your akua, if you have aloha for your akua and understand their functions, you will know how to work with them and how to respond to them. We too must change. We have to adapt to the elements. The first adaptation is that we must know who the akua are. The akua are different on each island and even in each ahupua'a, right? And we have to know the akua of our places. When we know our akua, we can call their names and activate them and ourselves. And I listened to her and I thought, that is so beautiful. And so when Kanaka Maoli scientists like Rosie Allegado talk about sea level rise, she describes it as the return of Kanaloa. And she asks the question, how are we to greet him? How are we to greet Kanaloa? And so this is asking us to know the names of 400,000 akua, or these natural elemental forms and processes. And here's an example in this image of Hina lua iko'a, Hina who vomits or brings forth coral from within. And that is the natural process of coral spawning. And she's partnered with Ku Keapua, who's the rising motion of the coral gametes. So in all of these descriptions of these relationships, it's the pilina, or the relatedness, the relationality between Kanaka and elements, between humans and elements, and also between the elements. And I've said this before, but I think it might have been Noelani Punivai who talks about how Kane and Kanaloa have a close relationship. We know that the freshwater streams creates a cold water barrier around the islands that keeps actually hurricanes from hitting our islands. So when hurricanes come barreling across the warm waters of the Pacific, as soon as they hit the cold water barrier around the islands, they veer north or they veer south. Now with the diversion of streams, that creates a huge problem. So what we see would be like, for example, since we're talking about streams, I'm thinking about the work Hi'ile has done with folks at Haleo Meheanu Fish Pond, yeah, in He'ea, to clear the He'ea stream to make sure that the cold water stream can oxygenate the waters of the fish pond. And that has created cascading restorative effects all over Kawahao Kamano, or Kaneohebe, yeah? And then Puni similarly talks about establishing a relationship with Haumea, and she talks about how she's teaching these young students. This is in chapter 5 about in the summer program, Mayuka Ku'uwa'a, So my canoe comes from the uplands, and she talks about how in order to build a canoe, you have to know the spirit of the tree. You need to know la'au lapa'au, you must know the winds, you must know the vai, you must know the kai. So that's why it's important to understand this relationship with the akua in order to transform otherwise devastating climate change events into possibilities for greater abundance. So I'm going to just kind of stop there, and I'm going to let, I don't know, Hile or Puni kind of jump in to talk a little bit more about the akua of their places or climate change and how they're dealing with it. So I'm sorry, stop share screen. Okay.
Okay, I go first.
All right, awesomeness.
Aloha kako. Thank you all for joining. Thank you to Candace, who's so funny because she considers us her kumu so silly because she was actually my kumu at UH Manoa. She taught my writing intensive English class. And you know, if you're a UH student, right, and it's like, oh, I gotta take 2 writing intensives before I can graduate. That was one, and I was so stoked because we got to read the story of Kamapua'a. And so I was like, oh, what kind of English class is this? I get to read Kamapua'a, awesome. Yeah, so that's Candace. But yeah, you know, so in my kuleana, my work has brought me here to the Ahupua'a of He'eia. I work for the nonprofit Pai Pai o He'eia. I'm one of 8 founders. And so, you know, I'm just one of 8. And, you know, 20 years later, I'm still here, and I'm so fortunate to be here. This work has really been a blessing and an awesome thing for our community. My ohana is from down the road, you know, not this Ahupua'a of He'eia specifically, but a couple of ahupua'a down the way. The ahupua'a of Ka'alaia is where my ohana is from. My ohana resides currently in Kahalu'u. So yeah, you know, us guys in Ko'olau, Poko, 96744 zip code, Kahalu'u, it's kind of all, you know, all inclusive. But so stoked to be able to work in my community. We've been, you know, I think we've been doing the physical work since 2000, prior to 2001, when our organization was formed, since 1998, since college days. We started the work here, or the labor of love, and it's just grown, you know, and I think when we first started, we never really thought about the work in terms of, or we're doing restoration, or we're going to restore this fish pond. We always thought about it in terms of just re-engaging community and education. Education in the early 2000s was what it was all about, with, you know, the start of many of our charter schools like Halau Kumana, Kekula o Kamakau, Hakipu'u Learning Center, plenty charter schools, and all of these keiki needed outdoor learning classrooms. And so He'eia was one of many learning classrooms, outdoor learning environments that we brought students to. And so, you know, when we talk about restoring ʻāina and lokoi, we're really talking about restoring kanaka and community and that pilina, reconnecting people to place, people to practice, people to akua, people to the lepo, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And climate change is a scary word. I don't prefer it. I don't like it. But, you know, when it was first presented to us, it was, oh, climate change. Oh, shucks, I'm not going to swear. I promise I'm not going to swear. But I was going to swear, but I just went bleep my own self. So I said, shucks. But, you know, it's a scary thought when people come to you and they tell you, oh, the sea level is rising. What you going to do? You've been working to restore this lokoi'a for 20 years. All that hard work and time of all these people to rebuild your wall may be insufficient. Your lokoi'a is just going to get inundated with the sea, the rising sea. It's so big and daunting. And then there's the flooding pressures from Mauka, you're going to budge and take you out. And yes, we know the predictions, we know the models, we know what is forecasted, but I prefer to think about it from preparedness perspective, you know, and in the history of our kupuna being in the ʻāina, you know, 1500 years or so, they have existed and adapted and evolved the whole time, and we are just we're just the current iteration of them. Might be like slightly different challenges we're presented with, but nonetheless we choose to be on ʻāina, and being on ʻāina is what gives us the authority, I say, you know, and the confidence to be able to make decisions and adjustments and refinements and continue that practice of evolution and adaptation, so as our ancestors, or as our ancestors would demand of us, really. And so it's really a privilege. And I think about us and our gang, our employees being here every day, how lucky we are to be here every day. Because we will be the ones that will adapt and will be the most prepared. And hopefully folks look to us and others on ʻāina to inform, yeah, you know, hopefully government looks at us and asks us these questions, because we have a lot to share.
Awesome.
I don't know, we just could talk story.
Yeah.
Wherever it takes us.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that you went first, Hile. That was heavy duty. It's really beautiful to be able to go after you. And actually the both of you are such like intelligent wahine moving forward. I feel a little bit shy on this panel. And he haumana vale no, I don't know, Candace, about this whole kumu aspect, because I really am learning a lot. Oh, Hile, I feel like there's a mirror between us all the time. That corridor of how is that physical and spiritual and ancient corridor. So just like the founding of Pai Pai, we also were responding to the needs of the community. And you're naming all of the charter schools, and you know, much of our beginnings, we had Halau Lokahi here, and definitely continue to work with all of the schools and community members to be able to establish Ho'oulu Āina. And you're right, we need to have government start to respond to that voice of authority that Hile is talking about. And the authority comes from the pilina. And I think, Candace, when you're talking about having that pilina to akua, that comes from those who are on the land. And Hile naming the crew, what a blessing to have a crew. When I was young, we didn't have one Malama ʻāina career pathway. There wasn't something that I knew about. It was, you know, and I think that we are connecting the dots that Uncle Danny had said, you know, that all of us trying to make sure not only is it a career pathway, but it's a policy pathway, it's a spiritual pathway. All of us have kuleana, and connecting those dots today, you know, I'm always beautifully and pleasantly surprised when those old pathways find their way again. Even to have you and I together here, Hile, on this screen, to me is that revitalizing of that corridor. And Candace, when you were writing the book and talking stories and gathering so beautifully and so respectfully and with such ha'aha'a, all of the mo'olelo, it was so beautiful whenever we would talk and you would say, oh yeah, Hile said that same thing. It was really validating because a lot of times you do feel like how Uncle Danny said in the beginning of your book, you know, like, oh, all us guys, we're kind of like doing the best we can, and it can feel really alone. But that sense that the Aloha Āina work that we're doing in Kalihi and in He'eia and, you know, in all the different places that you've named and mapped in this abundant document that you've made as this beautiful gift for all of us. I think that the restoration is, the language of restoration is similar to the language of climate change. It assumes a brokenness which is separate and different from understanding an evolution. And so, like how fast can the sea rise? Like one pohaku at a time, I guess, right? So, like, and then the same with Pilina, and I the passion with which you introduce you, and even put Noilani, who is another smarty pants science lady. I'm not a scientist. I always feel not quite as smart as everybody, but you got to know this, and you got to know this, and you got to know all the akua, and you got to know how the tides are changing. You got to know all this stuff, and guess what? You got to also learn it. You're not just born knowing all those things as a Hawaiian. And so that's why it's really, I think building the pilina is something that I like to really focus on, you know, that you got to start someplace, that a lot of us were not born into families where you're going to, like, you know, even be able to helu papa your own genealogy, your own mo'oku auhau, let alone helu papa 400,000 akua. And so I shy away from, you know, showing up as any sort of expert. And I'm absolutely, I was like studying before the thing. I'm like, okay, what do I need to know? What did I say? but I think what's really important is to make the pathways, those corridors within our families, within our communities, within ourselves, and to have that patience and that understanding to start from the beginning, right? Start from like where you are at. So as if we're aiming for kamehikana, if we're aiming for like, you know, all of the 400,000 akua, but we never even malama our own makua, our own kupuna, then you know, we're starting too far away. You got to start a little bit more close. And so here at Ho'oulu Āina, that mo'olelo that you're talking about with Mayuka Ku'uwa'a, we have kids who's like tiny, you know, they're like 6 years old, they're tiny. Actually, we have 4 years old sometimes. And they just, you know, they know how to malama their makua, their kupuna. We teach them how to make the ho'okupu. No sense have one big heiau if you don't even know how to feed anybody. So just the ahu, you know, like little by little, the tiny ahu, you know how to malama when you go someplace. So just these little, almost like preschool. And our lahui, we have like, you know, the pu'uhuluhulu is like next level. But a lot of times in our community, we got to start just at the beginning. And so I've been really excited and blessed to work with the community, and you know, just like those surprising moments, like, oh yeah, Piper is doing that too. Oh yeah. The corridor is you know, alive. The spiritual connection is revitalized. You know, the Ho'ailona are showing that we're finding that in the living, you know, in the planting, in the harvesting, in the ability to see how mea in ourselves as we give birth, to make space for wahine as we give birth to our babies, to our thoughts, to our nations, and that sense of sovereignty that you speak of, that sense of true agency for a lahui, is held in the Kanaka and our pilina to akua, but it has to kind of start with like making space for those real intimate relationships. And I'm a big hi'ile video fan too, because it's really, I'm like, oh, I'm an Instagram junkie, I think. But it's really beautiful because that, like, witnessing other families, other people building that pilina kind of helps us to remember our own kuleana, because you can like, you know, build your pilina for good or for not good, you know. If you don't have kuleana, then what is that for? And so I think that's what I love about Hi'ile, yourself, your own work, but also all of the people, Candace, that you named in the book. We're not scared to take on kuleana. Like, okay, yeah, that seems like a lot, but who else can do them? Or, you know, just making sure that that the objective, of building that pilina, the objective of learning those akua, the objective of reconnecting to culture, practice, it is the long-term abundance for the lahui. It is understanding, you know, the way that our kupuna understood how to revitalize or to make vibrant, you know, every interaction with each other and with ʻāina and with, you know, our cosmologies, you know. Okay, I went to cosmologies. Maybe Candace, you got to bring us back to Earth. I stay in the stars.
Oh, no, I think cosmology is a really big part of it. I mean, it reminded me when Kalen Uhiva talks about establishing sacred space, and she talked about Haumea casting her Heia Haumea out so that she can plot genealogies, time and space, the constellations. And it reminded me of how the hau, when it grows over the kalo patches, that it looks kind of like a hay, a homea. It's kind of like a hay, just like, you know, and they say that the hipu'u, or the little knots, are the, that's what Kale describes as the potentialities. And I was thinking about that. And so I see it kind of like with the hau that protects all of those lo'ikalo stones from being trampled by the ranchers, right? It would have been all trampled by the cattle, but the walls are still there in Punalu'u. So Danny Bishop can go with his machete, and then he can uncover those walls. And Kanaloa, who is, you know, he's not at Paipai'ohe'ea anymore, but he was at Paipai'ohe'ea, and he was talking about how the root balls are just small, and so you can, it's not like it's hard to dig out. So as far as the hau protecting the kalo, you know, people think of hau as invasive, but it's actually a protective kind of a hey, or that cosmology. And that spirituality part, I think that's what gets lost too in a lot of the talking about climate change. Where is the space for talking about how we're spiritually fed by the work that the two of you do as well? You know, I mean,
yeah. As you talk about how I reflect back to the beginning when Anakala Eddie Anana, you know, he was often at Kapapalo'i o Kanewai, and a lot of the mangrove used to build the halauva'a there came from He'eia Lokoi'a, and Anakala was here helping us debark and tease me about the way I squat. I squat like one Filipino, actually pake and pake. So yeah, I squat like one pake. But he often, well, we hear the phrase kali'uo kapa'akai, right? And this idea that our kupuna preserve, you know, salt is a mechanism for preservation, right? We never have ice box refrigeration, ikawamamua, so everything was salted, and we affectionately, it's an endearing thing when we think of salt, but it's a means for preserving food, but we also think about it in terms of preservation of space. For, you know, preservation of this lokoi'a until the right people come along, or the right individual, or right ohana, right community members come along. And so, you know, when you were speaking of how, that's what comes to mind, is kind of that same idea, that kind of pale, so to speak, for the how, especially until the time that we're makaukau to uncover and reveal. And in that process of restoration, physical restoration of space, right? We are restoring our spiritual selves as well, and you know, and that's why we do things slowly, right? We do things slowly. We take our time, and that's kind of been our approach. You know, I think when you talk to climate change people, especially, you get this feeling like, oh, you gotta hurry up. Things need to happen quicker. But everything when we deal with ʻāina tells us to slow down. And that process is really important, right? Because it allows us to listen and learn. And everybody learns at different paces, but I think when it comes to ʻāina and ʻāina work, that process is key, definitely. And so I also reflecting, talking about processes, very appreciative of you, Candace, in the way that you approached this book and compilation of all of our mo'olelo and stories, and time and energy and lessons learned from ʻāina and being on ʻāina, and just the way you approached it, and you know, the way you chose to sit down with each of us and make us feel real good about the work we do, and you know, you get so excited too. I love the excitement that it's like, oh, she's crazy, right? She's really excited about pigeon phrases that I'm throwing out there, but yeah, no, mahalo for approaching this.
Oh yeah.
In your way, yeah, very Candace way, but I think very appropriate for what's being discussed and presented.
You know, when you said a corridor of Haumea, almost had one orgasm, man.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, what?
Yeah, you know, because right, you hear the stories, right, of Haumea and for us meheanu, or you hear the kameha ikana. All same person. Same person.
That's right.
Hawahine, kailua. Same person. Haumea. We're talking about Haumea. Haumea is too big to talk about Haumea by her. I mean, Haumea.
One
so
name.
we talk about kameha ikana and meheanu.
Yep.
And yeah, I always wonder, you know, like, you know, I think in the work we do, we're always surrounded by plenty of people and community, which is great. But the reflective time for me is when there's nobody around.
Yeah.
And when I can kind of commiserate with the elements and the akua, right?
Yeah.
And I think about Haumea, I mean, how, you know, and most of the time the how is not flowering. At least for us here at Haleo Meheanu, you know, He'eia fish pond, it's not flowering. So when it does flower, then you pay attention. Right. And just so happens, or when it flowers here in He'eia, it's flowering in He'eia Kea, He'eia Uli, up in Waipau, up in Ha'iku, up and over the mountain to Puni folks, Kilohana area. So get so excited, you know, like what's happening here? What we talking about? Are we just talking about relationship, Pilina? Are we talking about chemistry? I don't know. And the I don't know part is so exciting to me. The I don't know. I think it's very humbling to not know. But it keeps that ʻiʻini and that drive, and for me in the role that I serve for the organization, I need that. It pushes me, it challenges me. Not necessarily to know or to find out. I think it's just the process of inquiry.
That's the mo'o. That's the mo'o. Yeah. Earlier today we have a young person. He's very young, and he's like, tell me about how mo'olelo and evaluation are related. And you know, he was really trying to like get this thing together. But yeah, I love, Hile, how you're saying it's not just about knowing. It's not just we're collecting ike. It's not the amassing like wealth of knowledge. It's about connecting that mo'o, making sure that this from here in time and space, that's the hei, right? In time and space that you can say, oh yeah, it's flowering right now. You know, we're flowering right now. So that means, you know, I'm going to pay attention. That's all it means. And the next time it might be earlier, it might be later. Or, you know, what is the relation? And then the connection, the pilina, maybe is pilina to us, but then also like, okay, now it's flowering, the kolea is here. You know, so where there's those other connections. And you know, we talk about sort of data points and constellating data points, but actually our kupuna have been doing this so long already that it's just like one more succession, one more understanding, and the importance of telling the mo'olelo. And Candace, your voice is so beautiful. It's like really this, when I read any book, I hear my own stupid voice. And I don't want to, you know, in my head, right? Reading, I hear my own voice. But when I read this book, I hear your voice. And it's so beautiful because there's a humility and a love and a passion. And I'm so like the articulate like description of each of our different ways that my own words sound so beautiful in your voice.
Because it's your voice.
And that's the mo'o to me.
Yeah.
That's the mo'olelo that now my voice is your voice and your voice is my voice, and we're connected in that way. And I'm seeing how the story that I'm telling is also Hi'ile's story. And the story that she's telling is also Kale's story. And I love that you also lifted up Haley's artwork.
Yes.
Haley
Ka'iliehu's Haumea.
Is Haumea, and it's also
there's that corridor.
Mo'olelo unfolding again and again.
Yeah.
And that I think that we talk about hei as the physical hei, but there's also the verb, right? The verb hei. And I think that when you see, oh yeah, same. Or when you feel like, okay, I feel the urgency. It's not like emergency. It's like not the climate change emergency. It's the urgency that makes you feel passion, that makes you feel like motivated, makes you love the work, even though it's like, I think I might die. The work is so heavy, but you can't help it. But that, and for us, that word ho'oulu is really important, that you're like in it to win it. You're like inspired to the point of possession, that we need to do this. Urgency drives all of those connections. And I love when I see a young person I can see it, I can see that in them. And you had, right before the presentation, you had emailed us saying, oh yeah, say anything that you want Hawaii to know. I'm like, well, that's a big, broad, area of discussion. But if I could have Hawaii know one thing in response to your request, is that the respect and humility and responsibility with which you did your research for this book, that is the standard. That is the standard that I've dreamed of but have not experienced. I'm super, super grateful to be included in any part of this story, to see myself and this work and this community as one little scale on the mo'o. I'm absolutely grateful, because how you went around that, the writing was just with true love, with truly loving, that aloha that is like fierce, that I'll protect it. I'm not going to reveal anything that is not pono, but also like, I'm so passionate about it, I might have an orgasm, so those like two makes this spectrum of like awesome storytelling that we can continue to build upon. I'm like, okay, read this, I'm like sharing with my young people. You've given us a tool to continue that pilina. And I mean, we didn't have that before. You know, nowadays you're like, oh yeah, you gotta know all the akua. I'm like, we never have Google before. I read inside one book that Rubelite Johnson said something about opapalaka na 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 na. Took me fucking years. Oh, I swear, took me
okay.
years. Bleep.
That's okay.
It took years before I could tie together this oli and that mo'olelo and that quote and that thing. It took forever. It took me a long time because we didn't have easy access to lots and lots of ike. We didn't have easy and quick access to each other. We didn't have easy and quick access to each other's kumu. But what you've made here is like testament to the power of that access, that power of the opened corridors.
Oh. Well, you know, I started thinking as you both were talking that it's kind of like if you look at all those projects that are all lined up on both sides of the ko'olau, you think that at every project, you guys are chanting. Yeah. You guys are chanting. You guys are looking to the oli for how kupuna approach climate change events. Yeah. And as you're all chanting like that, like I heard Kanaloa say that at Paipai Oheia, why do the fish stay? They stay, right? Because the little fish can choose to leave, but they stay in the fish pond because they like to hear the chanting. And I think the voice is lifted in chant that creates this kind of vibration, and you guys pull each other along as each project discovers new knowledge. You guys are pulling each other along, you know, like who would have thought that Meheano's urine, the mo'o's urine, would be integral to the nitrogen process that feeds He'ea fish pond, right? That's Kiana Frank's work. Yeah, sorry, my dog. But Kiana Frank's work looking at that kind of microbiology. And if you look at all these scientific papers, Hi'ile's name is in there. All of these scientific papers measuring climate change effects on the fish pond. And then thinking about Puni, the way that you make the akua so real for the little ones who look up to Kilohana and they know that that's where Papa and Wakea are living, yeah? That they know that they can look and it's right there in their backyards, so that the akua, like you were saying, they're not far away. And then just the work that you guys are doing, like bringing together everybody, like you said that at Ho'oulu Āina, you ho'omana, and you bring in everybody in the Pacific. So you have a Pacifica garden, which is just kind of amazing to me. And to think about all of that, you know, that people are coming in and are sharing knowledge about how to make coconut oil, coconut cream. I forget which one. It was one of them that there was a sharing of knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. We have the Chukis ladies. They like to come make coconut oil. So that was because always sharing like this, how you do it. This is how we do it. But also the carving, you know, you talked about how walking through the hau with the master carver from Satawal going, yeah, this is going to be good. This one not going to be good, you know. And so we have forgotten that. Yeah. So thank all the gods.
Yeah.
Across all the Pacific. Yeah, for that pilina, that connection, that telling of the story, that ability to continue to share.
Yeah.
But you know what, the mo'olelo, you know, in that mo'olelo, the kamehei kana mo'olelo, we share that story with the little kids all the time.
Yeah.
The part that they always ask for, and you know, we tell the kind of like the big events, not the whole thing because it's too long. We just tell the big events. Yeah. And every time when I pau and I told the whole mo'olelo, okay, that's the mo'olelo for now. They always say, wait, you didn't tell the part about the kukui. So their favorite part is the part about the kukui.
That's right. That's right.
They want to know that they're part of something much bigger. They want to remember, get 1,000 wahine just like me. I am one of 1,000 of many thousands. Yeah. You know, and that's powerful to me, you know, that I think that's true for the, you know, the 5-year-olds and the 40-year-olds.
Yeah, that image of Haumea standing in front of Kualoa in all her multitudinous Haumea bodies, and they're flickering between their mo'o forms and their wahine forms. And what is super cool is I was talking, and this is how it comes about, right? I was talking story with Kihei de Silva. And Kihei de Silva says, oh yeah, I wrote a poem about He Wahine A'ia'i, and that is actually a well-known kind of descriptor for how wahine. So we tend to know how wahine hangs out at Kawainui, but she was there because He Wahine A'ia'i is the one who responds to one of the messengers and says, tell Kumohonua's men to turn around and go back to where they came from. And when Kumohonua doesn't respect the women, that's when they pick up the kukui nuts and they let it fly and it hits all the men in the forehead and boom, they drop dead. But just that connection, right? That this wahine a'ia'i is hau wahine. So we know they're flickering between their mo'o forms and their wahine forms. And just thinking about all the mo'o who protect all the waterways of Kualoa, that is amazing. And that you look to, Meheanu and Kameha'ikana as the two mo'o who connect these projects that you work on. Yeah. I love that they remind you to don't forget to tell that part.
There was a question related to what we're talking about in the Q&A, related to mo'o.
Okay.
Kiahili.
Yeah.
Just asking about mo'o in general, I think. So yeah, for us guys at He'eia, our mo'o, her name is Meheanu. Some kupuna of the area believe that word to be mixed up, and letters mixed up and basically haumea. But Meheanu, she's a kupua, typical shapeshifter, mo'o, many forms, the ability to change between, just similar to Pele Ode, wahine, beautiful wahine, mo'o, mo'o meaning a giant, yellowy lizard, I think comparable in appearance to what a Komodo dragon. I think about it, not little gecko, not little house gecko, but for us, the two forms that Meheanu takes when she's in the lokoi'a, either that of an anai, and if you know lokoi'a, the keystone fish pond fish is the anai or the mullet fish. Different size classes, right? For that same fish, we start with the pua'ama, then we go to the kahaha, then we go to the ama, then we get to the anai. But same fish, and then also white eel. And so we think about, what white eel? Because there's different kinds of white eels, different species. There's the puhi with the sharp teeth, or there's the conger eel, which doesn't have the sharp teeth, but has like bony, rough plates in its mouth. Anyway, and associated, her kinolau is hau. And known to be present in the lokoi'a. Two variations on the story is the coloring, the coloring of the hau indicates Meheanu's presence in the lokoi'a. My uncle, Richard Paglinawan, from Waiahole, but living in Kahalu'u, he talks about the leaves taking on a yellowish hue. And he said the reason the leaves take on the yellowish hue is because the mo'o's mimi, the mo'o's shishi was so strong that wherever the mo'o would travel, it would change the foliage of that plant to take on that same kind of shishi color. Yeah, and then there's Kiana Frank that talks about, like, what is that really talking about? What biological processes or biochemical processes are taking place what is it really talking about? And so she landed ultimately on the nitrogen cycle. Yeah, we tend to see the hau flowers in He'eia when it's really, really hot and dry and very little rain. So like drought conditions, that's what causes the hau to flower here. Not sure if that's the same for Puni folks, but if we're talking corridor, I'm thinking we probably share similar, yeah, the water is doing something similar along that stretch.
Yeah, we don't, I mean, Kalihi is not having a lot of drought conditions. We often it's pretty wet, and so we do have long periods where we don't see the flowers, but we do have the times of the year or different times when not just the flowers show up, but also all of the yellow of the leaves. It just, I don't know, I'm not a scientist, I did already say. But what we're seeing is that that's when the water is changing, either from plenty water to less water or less water to plenty water. It's kind of like when, you know, even the taro gonna make the flower, which is also yellow, when the thing goes from plenty to little bit or from little bit to plenty, any sort of, and that is the transformation, right? That when the vai is changing in the ʻāina, that's the kino ʻāina changing, that's the transformation. And you know, for us too, we don't, I'm always tracking the hau flowers, because when anybody gives birth, that's what we, you know, we're like, okay, she's in labor, go get, you know, we are, even like a lot of times the wahine, they like to have the kaunaoa for that last month, and then just hau right at the very end. For me, because the hau is plenty over here, always hau plenty, you know, the last month of the pregnancy. But, you know, you got to find it here and there. And so you're tracking, because people are giving birth all year, no matter what the water is doing. And actually, it's kind of nice. I don't know how related it is, but maybe back to what Candace was saying about diversifying or broadening our understanding, and learning from and with our cousins across the Pacific. There's times when wahine are giving birth that there's no hau flowers, but the pele is flowering, you know, and the pele is of that same, you know, ohana, and or the okra. The okra might be flowering, and it has never come to an issue where I'm pulling a pele flower or an okra flower where there's not an ancestral connection as to why it's that and not hau. You know, that one person will say, oh, of course, because pele, or because of my, you know, ohana Tahiti, or, you know, this other ohana, and okra, oh yeah, because my ohana Filipino, that's why, you know. So it's still the ho'ailona, you know, and even within the hau, we have all of that oh, of course, it was the early morning, or I couldn't get it except for close by the beach, or, you know, so the flowering of the hau, not in its like the whole corridor activated, but even in the sporadic, when you're accessing for la'au, it's activating that pilina again, you know, like, right. Oh, no more clothes, you got to call so-and-so, because, or, you know, so you could take the truck, go up deeper or whatever. The ohana, or the wahine who is going to hanai, that she needs her own pale too. So the people who is getting the la'au, the people who is tracking the hau at the end of her, you know, hapai cycle, and the specific ʻāina where that hau is coming from, is telling her about her own journey into haumea-ness, you know, like it's her own haumea journey. It's, you know, so it's always this activated spiritual conversation.
I love that term, activating pilina. See, that right there is a very it's a very generative kind of way of thinking, yeah, because you're talking about adaptation. If no more hau, then use on different flower. And I was thinking about when I was interviewing Ki'ile too, she was saying that we have to change our palates. So we're so used to eating the pelagic kind of predator fish like the ahi and the aku, but we have to learn how to train our palates to eat anai mullet, yeah, And that was a big thing for me to think about that. Why, it's kind of like that song, He Ono, yeah? We got to learn to eat the fish that are close to shore, yeah? And this is kind of, and also thinking about, Puni, what you're saying about how we make doo-doo into our own water. And I remember you saying our kupuna would be horrified to know that we are using water to flush away our waste. And it made me also think more about composting toilets and how we think about water.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to think like, what are these lessons that I was learning from you?
Well, the spectrum between Ono and Kukai is a very broad spectrum, Candace. And so let's start with Ono.
Ono?
It is on the same spectrum.
Right.
But that's a velo ohana of mine is we talk about the Ono, but then we next, couple minutes later, we're talking about the Kukai.
Kukai, right?
So,
but it's the water. Yeah, it's the water and valuing water, valuing the fish pond, and like how you make poke with anai, make poke with mullet instead of make poke with ahi. But you're right.
Best poke I ever had, manini poke.
Oh.
Right? I mean, don't tell nobody. But you think you can only have make poke with ahi, but manini poke is with the skin on.
Yeah.
Like the skin helps with, you can eat the skin. You don't have to eat the skin. You can eat the skin, helps with digestion, yeah, because the scrapes on its way down. But yeah, manini poke with just pa'akai, limu kohu, little bit sweet onion, inamona, chili pepper. So no. But yeah, like that's all part of the process, right? Is we also restoring the ono, restoring that ono to our palate.
Yeah.
And if you grow it, you're gonna eat it, and that's how. Yeah.
Yeah. And and then that restoring the ono restores the pilina akua also. Mm-hmm. Because and I can tell the story of my own very slow evolution, my own spiritual evolution that is so slow that, to make ho'okupu on a regular basis, you got to be eating food that is appropriate for the akua. You're not going to be making ho'okupu if you're eating McDonald's all the time, and so the evolving towards eating the ʻāina, the ʻaimoana, that those are the ai that is appropriate for the kupuna, appropriate for the akua. As you increase, as myself and my family increase slow by slow, the kinds of food that we're eating, then our ability to make regular ho'okupu is going to increase, and our ability to farm and grow appropriate foods for ho'okupu and for our bodies, increases. And it is this slow decolonization of the ono, and it's not only of the palate, it's also of the pilina, right? Because we used to be like, okay, we gotta, and it's not even of only the things that we eat too. There's recent, I love, Candace, that you said, everybody chanting at the same time, or everybody, especially for the la nui, not only we chanting at the time, we're making ho'okupu at the same time. So I try my best to get little mohai here and there, so at least the kinolao is all shared, and there's that integrated, that's all part of the hei, the physical and the active. And so it used to be that, you got to go hike for 6 hours to go get this particular kinolao. Hi, Roger.
I'm a sign.
You're a ho'ailona Portuguese.
Regretfully, I have to bring this to a close.
Okay.
Because we have another panel coming right on your heels.
Right on our
fascinating conversation. You can see from the chat how much it was appreciated.
Yeah.
And I should say that for your Ohana network and for people who miss it today, it's available on the Better Tomorrow Speaker Series
Awesome.
YouTube channel. And then there will be a highlight version, which will be on our website for at least a year.
Okay.
So, and I will alert you to when that's ready so that you can spread the word. But thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.
And it was fascinating to hear. And, obviously a monumental book. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Aloha.
you. Thank you. Thank you for you guys. You guys are so awesomeness.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Candace. Mahalo,
Mahalo.
Roger.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Chile.
Roger. Thank you, Roger.